Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, magical ones, to the episode. I have been really feeling recently, I've been in conversation with lots of magical women who I'm just feeling have this deep desire for healing and learning to manifest more magical lives. They've got a deeper sense that they're here for something more than the mundane lives they are living, and honestly, it fills my heart. There's been some conversations where I'm just so filled with emotion for the depth of this work and what it offers. And I've created an offer that is going to help women who are just so over living in busy chaos and drama, constantly feeling they're putting out fires, feeling deeply ungrounded and unfulfilled, as if they have to wear armour. It's for the women who distract and numb themselves, whose bodies are secretly whispering or even shouting to them with low energy, with tension, with pain, with numbness, with mysterious disorders. It is for the women who are running around people pleasing, not honouring their own needs, and for the sensitive women who feel more than others and are feeling overwhelmed. And particularly for those women who have a sense deep down that they're here for something more soul-led, more passion-fueled. Maybe they have a sense they have hidden magical gifts, but that feels like a million miles away, and you want to heal yourself and own your magical power first. I've created something called Rosa, which is really an invitation into you opening your heart, learning to soften into your body and heal your life. If that is feeling like it could be something for you, we begin on the 20th of July, our 4-week journey, which dives into healing self-love, body wisdom, and magical manifestation. With archetypal apothecary Rosa, I can just feel the nourishing softness of, if you visualize a rose, I can just feel the nurturing, soft, full expression opening to blooming that offers. So I'm really excited. If that is calling to you, check it out at www.nicollebarton.co.uk/Rosa, ROSA. It is a low investment intentionally for all the women who want to start walking the path and in a really accessible way. So that is my intention. I'm also sharing a free event this week around why Rosa might be your medicine. So if you want to join that, head to the Rosa page and the link will be at the bottom to sign up for that. For now though, let's dive into our episode. It's all about inner child work. On The Secret Witch Show today, I am diving into one of the core elements of the path that helps women to heal themselves and move from mundane lives to a life of magic, inner child work. I explore what healing even is, as well as some common misconceptions about working with our inner child and the popular "do we need fixing" debate. In this episode, we explore why inner child work is so important and how we can open to begin our healing journey from a place of loving alchemy, tending, softness and expansion, and how important it actually is when we desire to manifest more magical lives. Let's dive in. Welcome, magical ones, to the show, and today we're talking about something that is really, probably, I was just feeling into this before the episode. it's really probably one of the most important parts of the path. We're talking about inner child work, how to do inner child work to open to your soul's healing power. And I really I can't just express how important this is to the work. And my heart is so full for this episode because it's something that is really, really dear to my heart. It's something that really I was awakened to a few years ago that was missing from many other paths, or if it wasn't, it was used in isolation. And I'm going to speak more to that because there's something that I've seen about inner child work that, well, first of all, you may not even be familiar with what it is, so we'll talk about that. But if you are familiar with what it is, it's often also not served in the way that we serve it here at Archetypal Apothecary. So I'm going to speak to that as well. But before we do, I just want to share the vision for this episode, because when we talk about inner child work, what we're really talking about is the energy of love, the energy of nurture, the energy of opening, the energy of healing, and the energy of softness. And I'm really, really feeling this at the moment. It's actually magically timed again that this was the episode that was chosen by our Secret Witch Society members. By the way, if you're not in our Secret Witch Society, please do join us if you feel aligned to. If you love this podcast, you'll probably love our group as well. It's a gorgeous sisterhood. But it's quite synchronistic that this episode was chosen because I've been feeling a real call recently to share more about the rose energy. And the rose energy to me feels like that very first tender energy that needs to be worked with in order for us to even begin to step into inner child work. Essentially, one of the things that's also been coming up recently for women that I've been in conversation with is some resistance to the idea of healing. And I think there's a couple of levels where this shows up actually. Firstly, some women can have resistance to the idea of healing because it conjures up this idea of fixing, that often the way that women know healing or have an experience of healing is this sense of going to other people to be healed, this sense of there's something wrong with me, I'm broken and I need fixing. And I just want to be very clear that that is not what we're talking about when we talk about inner child work and healing in this path. For me, the idea of fixing is not something I subscribe to. Like I've journeyed all of that. That was something I kind of got stuck in, this addiction to the idea of fixing. So when I talk about healing, what I am really talking about is a loving back of ourselves to the wholeness we were born with. For me, we were born as this beautiful whole soul, and over years of life, being in this kind of more mundane world, we hit up against traumas, and these traumas kind of add layers to our wholeness. If you imagine like an onion, its core is the wholeness of you, and then there's layers that come on top of those, and they kind of mask us seeing who we really were when we were born. So when we talk about healing, there's not a brokenness, there's a sense of there's a wholeness within you, and there's just these layers of wounding, of trauma, largely kind of created in childhood. So this is why the inner child work is so important, that want some love. Essentially, that's what we're doing when we're doing inner child work. We are reconnecting to ourselves and healing the layers, i.e. loving ourselves in the wounding that's in each of those layers, until we are able to see and get back in touch with the parts of ourselves that are whole. So anywhere we need healing is an invitation to reconnect to ourselves. And if we get really present with that, we can heal ourselves. So when we talk about opening to our soul's healing power, that is what this is all about. We are healing ourselves by loving ourselves back to wholeness. And one of the most important things, as I was saying, to do to heal is to, and when I talk about healing, I mean consciously healing rather than expecting someone else to heal us. So owning our power to heal ourselves. One of the most important things is to learn to see where our little girl is creating unconsciously for us. Now that might sound a really strange thing for me to say, so I'm going to break that down a little bit more. What I mean by that is that there are aspects of ourselves that are unconscious. Largely these layers of wounding we have usually suppressed, especially if they're kind of early on in childhood. We've kind of taken stories from them, created meaning from them, and then kind of hidden them away so that we can't find them, which is nice and complex for those of us who just want to heal and for that to be easy. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It's not going to be an easy journey, but it is going to be a journey that is filled with love. So it's like the paradox of this journey isn't easy, but it's also some of the most rewarding things that we can do for ourselves, because it's also the place where we learn to have love and compassion for ourselves. So going back to what I mean about where our little girl is creating unconsciously for us, what that means is that our little girl has kind of had this wounding, and she's come up with some stories around the wounding, and then these have gone into become our thoughts, and largely then we've shamed them and suppressed them because they feel painful or difficult to deal with, because we haven't seen that that's what's happening, and they get pushed into our unconscious. And what is happening at that point, it doesn't mean that they're not there. It means that our unconscious thoughts have been suppressed, they've been pushed away, but they're there creating for us in the background. And let me break that down a little bit more, because there's a common misunderstanding about manifestation. My women tend to be drawn to manifestation. Sometimes they have journeyed with manifestation, sometimes they're just curious about it. One of the things that is mistakenly taught in other parts about manifestation is that there's this idea of us having to do something. We have to sit there and make a wish, or we have to create a vision board, or there's something to do. And this is a huge misconception. It's something that manifestation is something that we are already doing. So let that sink in for a moment, because it's a crucial thing to understand. Like, when we are thinking that there's something to do to manifest, that's a misunderstanding. We are already manifesting. In every moment, we are creating. We're creating through thoughts, we're creating through story, and we're creating life constantly. Now, what that means is that when we are creating unconsciously, i.e. when we have these stories from our wounding that are unconscious, that is when our little girl is creating for us. And the work that we do in this path is to come to learn to love that little girl, to let her know that she doesn't need to create what we don't want anymore for us from her wounding, and reclaim our power to actually choose where to put our focus so that we do manifest what we desire. And that is really purely the essence of the work that we're doing here. And that, for me, is what true healing is. But this is the very reason why women are walking around wondering why their lives are in chaos, why they're in drama, why they are in the thick of mundanity, even though they say they long for magic. It's really because our little girl and her fears are unconsciously and innocently, and I say that word because it's deeply important to see that, a little girl and her fears are running the show. And this really, for me, is the importance of inner child work. It's like the missing link of like what is going on. And we really need to be able to illuminate all that is not being currently seen. And it's very difficult often to do that ourselves without some kind of prompting of deeper inquiry and see what's going on underneath the surface, because it's we often don't know for the very reason that it is unconscious. So it takes a little bit of prodding, and that word's interesting because it doesn't have a loving essence. So this is why the important thing in inner child work is not just to prod. It's really about approaching our inner child as if she's a human. She's a real person. She is a real person. She's, she's us, and love her, nurture her, heal her, bring that softness and openness, and start a dialogue with her. And this is what I'm really talking about when I talk about inner child work. So it's really, really important that we do that with love, because the more we do, the more can be seen. And yet, just to go back to what I was saying earlier about inner child work and shadow work being the things that are missing from most paths, what I see happens often in other types of healing paths is usually three different things. One, there can be this striving to fix through the external. So when I talk about this, I'm talking about maybe the work of like woo light is how I call it. Woo, that's your typical things like it's your typical magical practices, but they're not kind of interacted with in the same way that we do in this path. So this could be something like I don't know, using the manifestation piece, this typical, there's something to do. We have to do something to manifest. And that's a manifestation is a real magical art. And when we see the depth of it, i.e. that actually we're already creating, when we see how it truly works, there's a real beauty in that. But when we look at the kind of way that it's taught in a light lens, i.e. almost real magic made more palatable and more popular, that kind of woo light is almost striving to fix. There's a sense of like manifestation, or it could be the same with Reiki or any kind of external thing where it looks like you're going to a healer and you're just being fixed. That's missing the depth of inner child work. The second type of healing paths that I see is some form of ascension. And ascension is where we're really like the point of the path where we see, and it's really like relieving on many levels. Like we don't need to fix ourselves. Like this is all thought. There's a universal natural intelligence that's running the show, and we can just, float around with the universe and let it all happen. And there's a deeper, there's spirit, there's love, there's God, there's the divine is in charge. There's this universal intelligence behind life, and this is so important to see. Like if we try and skip from the woo light into the work that I do without actually seeing there is this natural intelligence to life, like it's going to be harder. Like we and that's why this is also still part of my path, as is the woo. But this is this second route. If we just approach it from this route only, without the inner child work, again, it's missing that critical piece of the puzzle. And then the third style of healing that I see is this kind of more therapy style inner child work. So this is where sometimes there is inner child work, but it's lacking any real kind of embodiment work, the kind of, which actually is very present in some of the woo. It's lacking an understanding of the ascension piece, and it really is often just that listening to our little girl and meeting her in her victim and her wounding, without actually helping her alchemize or heal or move forwards. So as you can see in isolation, none of those particular paths are that helpful on their own. So what my path is all about, and this is where I see is really the key of how healing works, my path is really about integrating all of those paths into a third option. And there was a quote that I came across recently by Carl Jung, which I absolutely adore. And it says, if union is to take place between opposites like spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious, bright and dark, and so on, it will happen in a third thing, which represents not a compromise, but something new. I've got goosebumps listening to that actually as I speak that out. And it really is important, because essentially there are so many different opposing options out there in self-help. There are so many different views on how to heal. You should do this, or you should try this, or there's this fix or that fix. And And really, what I'm here to awaken in the world is that there's a way where healing becomes about our own journey and trusting our wisdom, and really we can do that by going into our inner little girl and loving her and helping ourselves make what's unconscious conscious. And when we do that, that's really healing. Like, that is what healing is. Like, when we make what's unconscious conscious and are able to return to a place of choice, that is what's healing on all levels. And so my path, it's my point of view that women who are secretly magical, which is who I'm here to serve, and women who are looking to create a more meaningful life, they need a path that integrates all of the above into this new way. And that's really what I offer, is this new way that brings the ascension, the knowing that we are natural intelligence, that we are divine in a unique expression. That's part of what I teach. This knowing that the inner child work is really important. So the kind of therapy style inner child work, but in a much more generative, magical way, where we don't leave our inner child in victim, but we encourage her into cultivating a sense of safety for herself. Like, we tend her, we let her know that actually all is well. We can move through this. We don't have to stay clinging at the door. It's safe. And of course, also the other part that's integrated is the woo deep. So this is what I call the real magic, the real manifestation that helps you to own your power to self-heal. And that's where our archetypal apothecary remedies come in as well. There's the real magical piece here. So when you combine them, if they're in isolation, they're not that helpful as a solution. But when we combine them all together, you get our path, which guides women through 7 elements. And just to be clear, these 7 elements, if you follow them yourself and journey with them yourself, are still going to help you to move towards your vision. So it's not like you need to choose into our path in order to do that. That's why I provide this podcast. And that said, it can be really serving, as I said, to have a guide. So just wanted to make that clear, because the reason why I share this is in deep service. But these are the 7 elements of the path that I feel are important. And I feel, when I say I feel, I mean I feel on a visceral embodied state, because this is what I've embodied. This is also the path that many other magical women have been walking for the last few years, because it's been the work of probably the last 3 years to bring this body of work into the world. But essentially there's 7 elements that help you to reclaim your self-healing power and manifest a more magical life, where you can open to a deeper purpose, which tends to be what my women are called to. And these elements are, I'm going to list them. Actually, I'll share them with you first, and then I'll dive into a little bit more. So opening, embodiment, majesty, soul alchemy, invocation, liberation, and manifestation. And just to speak a little bit more deeply to those, opening is about opening our hearts. This is a journey. It's helpful to know that there is no aim to fix. This is a journey back to wholeness, the wholeness that is already there. And this is it requires an opening of our hearts to the work, to our journey, and to our deeper vision. And often at that point, there could be fear comes in, which is why the inner child work is so important. Because if we don't do the inner child work, we kind of get stuck at the opening piece and get stuck in this closed place where we just feel like a victim to life, feel like everything's mundane, there's no way, there's no possibility. So really that opening piece is around opening to our possibility, opening to magic, opening in all the ways. And the embodiment piece is because, again, once that opening has happened, what tends to happen for most women is that there's a sense of fear that comes in. If we open to something more, which is usually what women want, there's this sense of there's something more in life. But as soon as we open, our inner child gets really scared. Like, she's going to feel all the fear because that's not going to feel safe. So what we need to do at that point is go into our bodies. And this is, again, something that so many women who are living these crazy hectic lives, and they're spending all their time putting out the fires, and then by the time they've done that, they're really just having to numb themselves, and when I say numbing themselves, it's like this sense of just pushing everything down, like ignoring our bodies by being working, drinking, eating food, watching TV, or the ways that we typically numb our wisdom. Because listening to our wisdom which is held in our bodies, that our body will let us know what's going on by the different sensations it has, that again is terrifying. Because especially for a magical one, because if we think about the archetype of the witch, she was literally burned at the stake for following her body's wisdom. So it makes sense that women who are potentially magical will feel the fear of that. So going into the body for a magical one is quite a challenge, and will, again, in and of itself bring up inner child fears. But it is also the way, ironically, that we can begin to hear our inner child. And I'll share a little bit more on that in a while. Majesty is the owning of our power. So this is required in order to let our inner child know that we're safe. And this majestic part of us is really the part of us that is here to let our inner child know that she's been heard, know that she doesn't need to worry, doesn't need to cling on anymore to those old stories, and to love her. This is the adult part of us, essentially, that's here to heal the inner child. And in the spirit of archetypes, even the majesty and the child are both archetypes. Our inner little child is the part of us that feels the fear and her wounding. And our majestic queen is the part of us that knows her power. And all of these archetypes, we have every single archetype in us. And it's really our choice as to which we want to work with in each moment. So the majestic part of us is the part of us that can own our power and tend to our inner little girl. Soul alchemy is an element. It's really about wound alchemy and the discovery of our gift. And I'll talk a little bit to that later on. But essentially, it's kind of tending to our inner child so that she feels safe. And in doing so, having more revealed to us about who we really are beyond our wounding. This is an important part of the path, particularly for women who are here for that deeper sense of purpose, because this is the part where we start to discover that. And invocation. So invocation is the invoking, the calling in of an archetypal remedy to work with as a lens to illuminate where healing is needed. So this is about seeing where our inner child is creating for us, and using lenses of archetypes. For example, Rose is very much around, if I take the shadow of Rose, for example, Rose tends to have thorns. It's really quite sharp. It's there's quite a prickly sense to Rose, and like cures like, when we start to see that as a lens of like what Rose is offering to us, we can start to go into where our own inner prickliness, inner thorn has been created from a place of wounding in our inner little child. So that's helpful for us to begin to see where our inner child is creating for us based on the lens that we're working with, that we've invoked. Liberation is, of course, then the old stories that we have seen as we've invoked. So as we work with these remedies, we'll start to peel back the layers and start to see the old stories that have been created from each of these wounds. And the liberation piece is about choosing to tend our inner child and move into new stories, to heal, to liberate, to take aligned action, to let our little girl know that she's safe to choose differently. And then manifestation is that piece about learning to harness our focus towards our vision. So creating consciously rather than unconsciously. So being able to refocus our inner child once we have been with her, once we've allowed her to feel all her feelings, because that's the piece about embodiment and feeling all the feelings. So in essence, we're talking about a path that amalgamates all the most potent bodies of work into one route. The magical work, the inner child work, the shadow work, the soul work, and the ascension to spirit, all of it just as important, all of it integrated into one place. Like, that's so important. And let's talk about the most important thing about inner child work. It feels like that's been a good overview of how our inner little girl plays into healing. But it feels like the most important thing to talk about is this energy of love. Because that's something, again, that's missing from much inner child work. So if inner child work is done, often it's not served with the all is welcome energy that is critical for our inner child to feel safe enough to show us her darkness, which is essentially what we're asking her to do. We're asking her to say, okay, show us what we need to see, show us your pain, and we're going to hold it for you. And that is what keeps her creating for us. If she's not given that love, she will not feel safe to come out. It's like if you literally imagine a little girl and you're saying, come here, it's okay, like, we're going to listen to you, we're going to hold you, we're going to welcome you, all parts of you are welcome. If you're kind of loving her and nurturing her and saying, come here, it's safe, we've got a blanket, we're all cozy, we've got a cup of tea. She might not want tea, actually. Maybe we've got some cake. Whatever it is that's going to lure our little girl out of her cave where she's kind of gripping on, like, in the darkness. Bless her heart. You know, we need to welcome her. And that is particularly challenging when we've spent our whole lives shaming, blaming, shoving her down. This is something that is really necessary, is that energy of love. And Rosa, as I mentioned, is all about opening to love, softening, learning to nurture those parts of ourselves. And that is really a remedy I'm being called to serve next. So if you're interested in that, then the link will be in the show notes for this. But it's really helpful when you think about the softness of the rose. If you imagine, you know, the beauty, the softness, the tenderness, the silkiness of a rose, and you think about the energy of that loving energy of that soft energy, this really is the energy to bring to working with your little girl, because it's helpful to remember that our little girl's fear is innocent. It's come from wounding. And it's often helpful as well. Another thing I invite women to do when they hit up against this is imagine someone that you love, whether that's I don't know, if you've got children, maybe it's your children. If it's your, you know, if you haven't got children, then maybe it's an animal or something that's innocent. Picture that in your mind. Think about how you would speak to them. You wouldn't shame, you wouldn't blame, you wouldn't push them away. Like, this is really the invitation with our little girl. And it's helpful to remember that her fear is innocent. And fear comes up when we get in touch with our deeper meaning, our truth, our dreams. I was in conversations with women the other day, actually, yesterday, and I just had this real sense of reverence for the welcoming of all, because when we do, it's so deeply healing. Like, women speaking out their gifts, often for the first time, in this space of all being welcome, and they've spent a lifetime thinking that they're odd, that they're weird because of their sensitivities, they're weird because of these gifts that they have, like they can, I don't know, see spirits or all sorts of different more magical gifts, and they often think they're the only ones. So for them to know that it's so welcome to share with me something that they've even not voiced to anyone their entire lives, there's something so healing in that. Because again, there's often this fear in magical ones. This little girl has been fearful of magic. She's been taught when she's young that magic is not allowed. Particularly this comes up around the witch. The witch is an archetype, is very activating for women who have maybe grown up in religious backgrounds and it feels really taboo. There's a lot of fear, a lot of tending that can come up in order to even choose into seeing that maybe they have spiritual gifts. And this is all part of this process of like healing. And when women come to my space and I hold that space for them, I was moved to tears yesterday, actually, thinking just the absolute sheer power of a space where all is welcome, and particularly where your magic is welcome. And this is really the space that I'm inviting you to create for yourself. Like, you're not odd. There are others like you, and this is safe. And I think that's so healing to know, and it's so healing when we know that we can create that safe space for ourselves. So that soft, open, loving energy of the rose is so important. It's what helps with that first part of opening, that first part of the journey, that first element of opening. It's what we're really doing when we go into inner child work, is learning to hear the parts of us that have been silenced, shamed, ignored, not given voice. And largely that looks to women like that is by society, by others. But the deeper thing to see here is that it is also been silenced, shamed, ignored, not given a voice by ourselves. And again, maybe even inner child tending there, because it's like we then go into beating ourselves up, and that's not the intention. Again, this has been innocently created by a little girl who didn't feel safe. And when we're shaming ourselves, we are denying our own voice. And in inner child work, we're learning to look at our wounds. We're learning to tend ourselves. We're learning how to love ourselves. You know, the idea of loving ourselves for women can often feel like the most gigantic task. So if all you can do is bring compassion, that's a good first step. Like, if you can't even bring love to yourself, compassion, whatever that is positive that you can bring to yourself and your inner child is medicine. And you will get there to the point of being able to love her. This is the work. But that is the energy you bring to inner child work. I know there can even be some resistance in some women for that softness and tenderness, especially if there's wounding around what softness and tenderness looks like, which again is often the witch. When we think about, if I think about the rose energy, even the rose herself could be quite triggering for my women, because there's this sense of like having to plow through life, like softness, tenderness, not being welcome. That's a place to look to return you to wholeness. If you are feeling resistance to softness and tenderness, what is the wound? What is your little girl scared of? Because that's your birthright. And this is why so often it's approached from beating ourselves up, from why do you think that, from you're broken, I need to fix you. And you're not broken. Really all that's happening is your little girl is just hanging on the door, begging you to stay safe and wanting some love. And she will likely also kick off and throw out triggers and, all sorts of responses that we don't want, to let us know that she's there. She wants to be heard. And so that is the invitation here, is to start to hear her. And a great example, just to show a little bit more context in my own life, is how I constantly lean into, it's easy to think that a guide's work is done, and I make it really clear all the time, because it's really important to me for people to know that my work is not done, and any guide that says their work is done is probably one that's thinking also that you need fixing. just to share. Our work is never done, and I constantly lean into tending the fear of my own little girl and her fears about not feeling safe to express her magic. In particular, one of the things that is something that seems so strange, and I'm sure many witches can relate to, many secret witches or magical ones, whatever feels the less triggering phrase, you would be amazed at how hard it's been for me to feel safe to express joy. And just to share a little bit more about my inner child there, when I was young, my dad left on my first day of school, so it's like all the trauma in one go. And if that wasn't enough, it was the same week that we're also meant to be collecting my new adopted sister, Mariana. And I had given her this, wrapped it up, this little red pencil case I never forget, because I was so excited that she was coming. And so excited, so joyful about getting a sister. I'd met her, we'd gone to Romania where she was from, we'd met her. I was like really, really excited. And then in one day, my whole life got obliterated and all my joy was blown up. And I had no idea that I'd created stories around that experience where joy was unsafe, where I didn't deserve joy. And so my little girl, until I started to go into this inner child work, felt that she didn't deserve joy, and my adult just felt like I didn't deserve joy. And from there I would create all the sabotaging of joy because my inner little girl was feeling that wounding. And my deep work was to allow her to feel that, to hold her heart, to hear her, to acknowledge her fears, to acknowledge the stories that were created around that experience, and to welcome that fear of joy, which sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It's like you'd think you could come from a lens of like beaten up, and you think joy is so easy to receive. And yet for so many magical women who have had trauma early on, they often hold on to so many stories unconsciously. And the point is, if we don't welcome them, they'll create for us. And for me, my stories would have me sabotage every bit of joy that I ever had the possibility of creating, because joy didn't feel safe. I was scared that everything would just obliterate if I felt joy. And my body held on to that story, held on to the tension, held on to constriction, because our bodies will feel these stories even when they're even when they're unconscious to us. And it was only in listening to my little girl, hearing her fears, learning to heal and alchemize them, that I could open to a new story of joy being possible for me. And essentially what's happening is our little girls are really hanging on the doors saying, no, this isn't safe. This isn't safe. And when we engage with inner child work, we have the capacity for that more powerful adult part of ourselves to dialogue with our little girl and to let her know that it's okay. So how do we do inner child work to reclaim our healing power then? There are two levels to this. Firstly, there's the woman who just longs to heal herself. You may be stuck in a mundane life. You might want to create a more magical life. You want to learn to reclaim your power. The first steps of this require you to start to open your heart to a new way, to open your heart to journey with your inner child, to open to beginning to go into your body, to hear what your body is showing you via the symptoms it's throwing out. Perhaps numbness, the mysterious illness, the fatigue, and to open to more being revealed about why these symptoms are showing up. This is really the route to open to healing, to open to claiming conscious healing, and will really reveal more about what your inner child believes. For example, I had abuse in my childhood, and I was abused from the right side. The right side of my body is tense, tight, constricted. It is holding on to the patterns of fear and letting me know that my inner little girl does not feel safe on the right side. And that's something that wants love, something that I'm always in the work of, something that's actually only been revealed to me quite recently, in the last few months actually. It's a newer piece of alchemy, but it's a really great example of how our bodies will show us what we're holding on to. And so the first steps are opening and going into the body. This is how we begin to let our inner child know that she's safe. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 7 elements to this work, but we can't really skip ahead. We need to start right at the beginning with the opening and softening and going into our bodies. We have to learn to heal ourselves first. And then there's the woman who also starts to open to feeling she has magical gifts, and her work really is the same, but I just want to speak to a nuanced point, because we think that we need to heal via all the external tools and pass those on, but really it's the inner work that is our gift. And as we go into this inner child work, we tend to discover that there's also one kind of main core wound that's stuck with us all our lives. And for me, it was rejection and the fear of judgment, which is now why I work with women who feel this so intensely around their magical gifts. But there's a reason here why it's so important to work with inner child work, because first and foremost, it's healing for us. So the 7 elements I was talking about, that's the personal journey of healing. But there's also a part of the healing where women tend to feel they have a more magical, meaningful purpose, and along the route of that journey of healing, first and foremost, it's the healing what comes up for us. But as we do, we also begin to discover our gifts, because our purpose, our medicine, is discovered in our deepest wound. And without our inner little girl, if we're dismissing her and her fear, we're actually not able to discover our gifts. And this is really what I'm talking to, is the soul alchemy element of the path that we talked about. So that is why inner child work is really important. First and foremost, for us to heal ourselves, but also because as we do, we're able to discover our gifts. And the real invitation is to work with that soft, loving, open energy and heal our little girls for ourselves first and foremost. But it's helpful to know that as we do, there is also a discovery of who our soul came to be, a returning to our soul purpose, our deeper purpose. So I just wanted to share that as well. That first and foremost, we own our power by revealing what is unconscious. The more we can see, the more we can heal and claim our power. And I've really created all sorts of healing by going into my inner little girl and loving her, including things that you wouldn't have even thought was possible. So this applies very tangibly in the world to whatever you long to heal. And one of my examples is healing my paralysed face, which I was told by doctors would never, ever heal. And it really has been this conscious learning to work with my inner child that has helped me to create all the tangible benefits, whether that's something physical in your body, whether that's your mind, your spirit, or just your life. Whatever it is that you want to heal and create change, this inner child work is so important. It's really, inner child work is about reclaiming our power to create what's really aligned. And that to me really is what real true healing is. It's creating from the true expression of our souls. And usually that's full of fear. So our little girls will try and stop us. And the more that we can see the fear and love it, heal it and welcome it, the closer we will come to the purity of our soul. And that really, for me, is what healing is. That's what owning our creative power is. And the most important thing is to do that with love. I'm going to leave it there. That feels like, just a deep, a rich invitation into softness. So I would love to hear what came up for you in this episode. If it feels aligned to share, please do hop into our Secret Witch Society group and share in there, or feel free to message me privately if that's I know secret witches often have the fear of showing up and sharing their voice, which makes perfect sense, and there's some inner child tending to do there. But I'd love to hear what this brought alive for you, and if there's a question to inquire into and that I would love to hear you share more on, it's, what do you notice about how you have interacted so far with your little girl? Have you been shaming her? Have you been blaming her? Were you even aware of her? What has this brought alive for you? I'm going to leave it there and sending you all the love. What a nurturing episode. Here are my takeaways. Inner child work is not about fixing. We need to take the blame and the sense that something is wrong with our wounded little girl if we're able to get anywhere with healing ourselves. The reason why inner child work is so important is because largely it is our unconscious inner child who is manifesting for us without us even knowing. The path of healing requires deep love for the tender young parts of ourselves that are trying to create for us, which we're largely unconscious of. It's helpful to see our inner child as a real live human who is trying to let us know she is scared, and to treat her as you would an innocently scared loved one. If we're missing inner child work in our healing, then we're missing the true art of healing. And yet we must also work with her in a way that is generative and holding her hand to move towards magic. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.